it's time to sharpen up those edges and grease up your chains.
We are going to live it up with mountain life. Dropping in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, mountain lifers? Can you feel it? Can you smell it in the air? Summer is looming, and the days are feeling nice and long, and the birds are chirping earlier each morning than a lot of us probably care for. So what's your plan? What's the most idyllic summer you can remember? Can you pull something like that off again this year? My name is Feet Banks. This is the Live It Up with Mountain Life podcast, and we have climbing legend and author Sonnie Trotter on the show today, which is fitting because when I think about the most easygoing summer of my life, it was full of rock climbing. This is back in 1995. I had a year off to save money for university, and me and my buddy Tempura Mike had decided that since we had enough of the gear already, climbing was the cheapest way to fill the days while still... No one I knew had a cell phone in 1995, but Mike and I had pagers, tiny vibrating boxes with a numeric display that we'd use to communicate via a complicated code of numbers that meant different things. We had codes that would let us know who was calling and what they wanted. 911 meant emergency, 213 meant I'm at the beach, 213 is, of course, the area code for Long Beach, California, and we lived in Whistler, so that made sense to us somehow. Mike would page me from a payphone outside Food Plus grocery store in Whistler, and I'd pick him up and we'd head to Squamish to climb. The rock was better there, the days were warmer, and there was a Taco Bell, which meant we could eat cheap and feel somewhat urban at the same time, us and our pagers. And what a summer that was. Very little cares in the world beyond hoping not to fall or hoping that your belayer was paying attention and not staring at the North Vancouver climbing gym girls who would sometimes show up at the crag and climb the pants off everyone. Not literally. And I think we climbed 58 times that summer, which is pretty good for dudes with jobs. We never let anything above a 510C, but that lifestyle, simple, outside, and yet extremely challenging to both mind and body, is something that I'll never forget. Sonnie Trotter also started climbing as a teenager, but he never gave up on that climbing lifestyle. And we're going to get into that in more detail right after these messages from our partners over at Citizen Watches. Time is important in the mountains. Out there in the wild, missing a rendezvous or misjudging how much daylight is left can have dire consequences. For over 100 years, Citizen have been known for creating quality timepieces and embracing ideas and actions that elevate society above self and respect the planet we love to explore. Need an altimeter or a pro-quality dive watch? Citizen's ProMaster series provide functionality, durability, and the spirit of adventure up in the air, on land, or at sea. With a huge line of professional-grade, sport-inspired designs, Citizen keeps you on time and makes every minute count. Find your next perfect timepiece at citizenwatch.com. Better starts now. Okay, Sonnie Trotter. Raised in Ontario, he started climbing indoors and never looked back. He's climbed competitively, but also embarked on month-long trips with his family. He's pioneered some of the hardest routes in Canada and been on big walls all over the world with other icons of the sport. And throughout it all, Sonnie never lost that love and that drive that fueled him as a teenager. Climbing is a lifestyle. To reach the level Sonnie has hit, you need to sacrifice almost everything to it. Your time, your money, sometimes your romantic prospects. A true climber has to be ready to heed the call of warmer, drier, steeper rock, or an untamed route that won't let go of your mind. 58 days of climbing a summer is cute, but it's not enough. And Sonnie talks about that in his new book, which is published by Patagonia and covers what he considers some of the most influential moments and climbs of his life and career. Sonnie and his family are currently in Canmore, Alberta, and I caught up with him via one of those internet video chat programs that too often seems to crap out at the most inopportune moments, which is what it did this time. So right at the end of the pod, you might hear where I had to make some edits and call Sonnie back to re-record his last two answers. Apologies, mountain lifers. I have no control over these things, but that certainly never happened back when I only had a pager. Here we go. Sonnie Trotter. Sonnie, I wanted to talk about your new book to start off with, but then I literally just learned 5 minutes ago that you're in the opening scene of freaking Twilight Breaking Dawn 2, and you almost got eaten by Kristen Stewart whilst free soloing. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so well, I was wired up. So they use this tiny little cable. I've never I've never been clipped to such a thin piece of gear before, but it was steel cable, so it was super strong, and I guess they could easily edit it out. But yeah, that was quite a few years ago now. This is going back quite a
What
ways.
face was that?
Um, that was near like the Tantalus wall, basically. Yeah,
Right.
on the far right side of their chief, and yeah, nice clean face. They lowered me down on like a winch, basically, and then I would repeatedly climb back out,
Right,
and
right.
yeah, it was super fun, to be honest. Just the fact that like the just hanging with the like the stunt crew. They just love what
Yeah,
they do, you know, the engineering, um the creativity that they have to try to make what's in the vision and make it a reality. I thought that was really cool, that process. So yeah, the stunt crew seems like they have a really good time doing their job, and I got to see their window for a very, short time. I think we filmed for 4 or 5 days or something like that, if I recall. And in the end, it was like, you know, 8 seconds of
yeah,
footage.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, yeah. But
Did
yeah.
you didn't end up with a bunch of weird stalkers or anything? Like the Twilight movies were pretty big for a while, but you were far enough removed from the main cast that it didn't really affect your life.
Yeah, luckily, I really didn't want, I needed the money, but I didn't really want to be like a face or,
Yeah, yeah,
and they actually weren't sure. So we ended up doing a lot of extra scenes where there was more face shots and things like that. And but in the end, I think the editor, the way it worked is maybe the editor wanted it would be too confusing to introduce like a, you know,
totally. A new character,
and
a ruggedly handsome rock climber in the middle of
no,
this
no.
movie.
But I was so grateful that they did it. It ended up being like my leg and my neck, and that was about it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
no, but word got out a little bit, and I did get a few, emails from friends and friends of friends. But it was pretty minor, so thankfully, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I
I prefer to be behind the scenes on everything, to be honest. But
well, yeah. I mean, we'll
yeah.
talk about that. You mentioned that in the book. Anyhow, I have it in my hand. Uplifted is the name of
Oh
the book. You open the book with a Helen Keller quote. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. I'm interested in that. I mean, Helen was a big deal when I was a kid, but I'm not sure if like do your kids know about Helen Keller? I'm not sure if mine does.
no, no.
Yeah, yeah,
If I tried to bring that up now, it'd be crickets. Yeah.
totally. So why did you choose that as an opening quote?
It's just one of those things that's just resonated really strongly with me.
Yeah,
You know, yeah, I talk I basically talk about my growing up of sort of being in this, going from this really adventurous farm life when I was really young to then sort of this cookie cutter kind of you know, suburb, I guess, and how I felt a little bit stifled.
right.
And I really wanted to be close, really close to nature. And nature always was adventurous to me. And the city can be an adventure. I just didn't connect with it very strongly. And so, yeah, when I saw that quote for the first time, in fact, actually, I saw it on like like a card,
Right.
like a
Like
gift card type of thing.
yeah,
And there was, this black and white photo of this kid launching himself off a 4 foot, homemade jump out of like a box rocket on wagon on wheels type of thing, and
for sure.
had the helmet on and the flames painted on the side of the cardboard box. And, it just stuck with me. And I like to look at everything that we do, I do, my kids do, my wife, every choice we make, I like to frame it as an adventure. And, whether it's a job, taking a job or a contract or moving or, living in our van or our trailer, like everything, if you can look at it like an adventure, I feel like it's just more palatable for me. It's easier because there are things that suck about doing something new,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of great things that come out of it as well. And so you kind of have to look at both things. It's like, so that's just a good framework for me.
I
And
think it's an easier sell for the kids too if you can talk them into an adventure. So once you get through Helen Keller, the book opens with this story of doubt, of your mindset not being totally dialed in on a trip up. I think it's Mount Stephen with
yeah,
Tommy
Mount
Caldwell,
Stephen.
Mount Stephen, and you're
Yeah.
thinking, and the reason you're not there is because you're thinking about the birth of your first child. Um, and then eventually, stuff happens and you walk away from the climb. Had that ever happened before on a trip where you weren't as in the moment or focused on the task at hand as you thought you needed to be?
No, not that I can remember. I think the book is, I think what I tried to do is describe really pivotal moments in my life. And
Yeah.
I think to that point, I couldn't think of one that, no, great question though, but not that I
Yeah.
recall. I think
Like
that was the
obviously
first one. Yeah.
you pull off sometimes because of weather or whatever, but that was
Yeah.
the first time with like where it was an internal thing.
Fully. Yeah. It was definitely like a more emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that
Yeah.
happens more as you've aged after, becoming a parent and you have to start mixing that risk versus responsibility more?
I mean, for me, I would say 100%. I look at climbs that I've dreamt about doing, and I look at them now, and I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I can
Yeah.
appreciate it from here, and I don't need to be up there right now. And it's interesting because I think a lot of us, I think we still long for that that uncertainty to a degree, or that risk and that position. I think for a lot of climbers or skiers or mountain bikers, I think a lot of times it's the position that really draws you in. It's not necessarily the move by move or turn by turn. It's being somewhere
Right.
incredible.
Yeah.
And I look up at some of the climbs that look incredible to me, and I'm like, I'm good. I don't
Yeah.
that wave of like committing everything has kind of been subdued a little bit. So
So yeah, next you could maybe be base camp manager from now on.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, like I still want to do climbs. They just don't necessarily need to be the dangerous ones anymore.
Yeah.
I think, I and like actually I'm planning a trip. I'd still like to do some dangerous climbs, but what I write about in the book a little bit is how I'm more attracted now to the things that I can control you know, a lot of times, like on Mount Stephen, there's just so many elements that you can't control with melting snow, falling ice, falling rock,
Yeah.
the mountain, shifting, and that's the stuff now that it's always made me nervous, but now it basically it terrifies me.
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder if
be-
if that would have happened with age anyhow and being a parent just fast tracks it.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I look at a lot of my friends and they're like, they're participating in other activities and they're equally as happy.
Yeah.
It's just the gradual transition we all go through, I think. Yep.
You mentioned how the book is, and every chapter is pretty unique. There's definitely a few chapters about the young days, but how it's more pivotal moments. And I wanted to ask about, how did you choose? You kind of said you chose pivotal moments, but I talked to Paul Bride, and he was like, "Oh, make sure he tells you about the time we went deep water soloing in Malta because we saw some good rock in the background of the movie Count of Monte Cristo." And there's so many stories like that where you guys show up. It wasn't maybe what you expected, but there's a million stories that didn't make it in the book.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was really hard. I think like, when you've been doing an activity or something that you're now going to try to share, 30 years of climbing is very hard to write in, you know, 18 chapters. And so I think at the end of the day, I had to really try to describe things that were, well, one that led into the next chapter of my life. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and I just wanted it to be pivotal chapters, like the Malta trip was amazing. It was one of the funnest trips we've ever been on.
Right.
But
Is
but
that in hindsight? Like, because the way Paul said you called it the most uncomfortable island ever.
oh yeah, I mean it was just a joke, but yeah, it was sharp rock, super sharp
Right,
rock,
right.
and it was awesome. I mean, just battling things that we didn't expect.
Yeah.
Camping in this cave, like 80 feet off the top of the ocean, like on the side of a cliff. And then it was so fun. We like in the morning, we'd solo out on the rock, easy terrain, but still lots of exposure. We'd solo up with backpacks, walk into town, get some groceries, walk back to the edge of the cliff, and then down solo into our little cave. And it was just such an awesome trip. And, just being so young, we just did it on a budget. Everyone brought a
Yeah.
tent and
And in
yeah,
those
just
days, it's not like people were talking about that cave on the internet, right? You had to find
Oh
it
no,
yourself.
no, no. Oh, 100%. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
roaming around in these, in our paddle boats, like basically just looking for what drew us the most. And we explored, 60% of the coastline. I think it was an incredible trip. Yeah, yeah. But I did write a short sort of a trip report in Rock and Ice years ago about that. And, you know, again, it was really hard to be like, well, does this make it into this collection of stories or
Yeah.
not? And that's just one. I mean, guys like Paul and I mean, we feel like we've been traveling almost nonstop. And then recently, of course, I've got kids and that slowed things down a little bit. But yeah, it's hard to decide, and I still feel like in kind of like in a piece of art, sometimes it's just never finished. It's like,
Yeah, of course, right?
there's
You either hit
sentences.
you hit the deadline and that means it's finished.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I guess we'll see. I imagine depending on how things go, Patagonia might come at you for volume two, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? I guess I still need to sit with this one a little bit.
Uh,
I never really set out to write a book. I never thought that I would ever do that. And in the end, the way that it worked for me was I approached it with this, like, I just want to tell some short stories,
yeah.
a collection of short stories. But then as it evolved, it turned into sort of this arcing tale of the journey of a climber from when you first sort of are exposed to it to how it evolves and then again becoming a father. So the timing worked out. And I know that Barry Blanchard, another climber here in Canmore, Alberta, he's working on his second volume. Is coming out soon, I think in the fall. So who knows where it'll go, but it's been a journey.
I definitely will come back to the book. I have lots to say about that, but I wanted to just, talk. Maybe not everybody that listens to this pod knows that much about rock climbing. When you're at a dinner party or something, you have to explain what you do to someone. Like, how do you Cole's notes shorten down rock climbing? Some people don't even realize that you use ropes some of the time, right? Or like,
Hmm.
how do you explain, your career?
Yeah, it's tricky because climbing, when you get into sort of the nuances of it all, it can be very hard to describe to people. The difference between 513A and 513B, the difference between an R-rated route and an X-rated route, or an RX rated route. It gets very technical, and I think that's something I did end up I had to write about it because
Yeah.
it's part of my climbing experience and what I'm drawn to. But for people who aren't climbers, they might be baffling to try to understand
Yeah,
the
yeah.
nuances, but because they're subtle, right? They're very
Yeah.
subtle.
There's a good
Um,
glossary in the back of the book for everyone who's scared. Like, no, drop in, just reference the glossary.
oh,
Uh,
thank you for that. Yeah, yeah. So that's helpful, definitely. Um, but yeah, I mean, basically, how do I describe myself? I just say that I like rock climbing, and I typically look for, Patagonia had a blog, the cleanest line on the steepest face. And I would say that's something that I think we all share. We
yeah,
look for
yeah.
these steep lines on these big clean faces,
Yeah,
and
yeah. And
you
that's
know,
whether you're going up or down, really, right? Skiers will
yeah,
say the same thing.
exactly. Yeah. And we do it all. We do the bunny hill, and I do the family crags and things like that. But what I'm really drawn to are the big clean faces, So
Yeah,
yeah.
you mentioned in the book, but I just for people to give them a teaser, when you were young and you're found these climbing gyms really that were an escape from the suburban lifestyle, and then you got to go outdoors. But do you remember the exact moment where everything clicked and you kind of knew like this is my path for the next as long as I can see forward anyhow?
I hmm. I mean, I do have this one. So I wrote in that chapter, I wrote that, how do you define, becoming a climber or becoming a skier or becoming, I
Hmm.
think I even said becoming a local. Like, how do you define that? Right. And I don't have an answer, but I wrote that I remember when I had like bloody flappers on both of my hands. And I remember, so what happened there was, I didn't describe it very well, but there's this roof cave in our climbing gym that was like 40 feet long. And I just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I did so many laps on this roof that literally I had ripped, bloody flappers on both hands. And I went home and my dad's like, what happened to me? You know? And I was like, and it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if that, like, to me, that's a pretty visceral memory of like, I don't know why I did that. Most people would do it once or twice and be like, oh, that was good. I just did it for like an hour straight. And so when I think back to like, I could do this for the rest of my life, or as long as my body would allow me to.
Yeah.
That maybe is that moment. I was like just turning 16 years old. And I don't know why it's so much fun, but it was just
I mean,
playful. Yeah.
kids, I think that's a good indicator is if you're bleeding and you're smiling, you might be on the right path, right? My kid always used to say, if you're not bloody or muddy, you wasted your day, right? So
I love that.
um just
That's
coming back to
awesome.
that idea about identity and when do we give ourselves permission to tell people I'm a climber, I'm a writer, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a whatever. And I think you talk about struggling with that back in the early 90s, late 80s. um People still, they call it imposter syndrome now, but it's really
Yeah.
all kind of the same thing. And I think it's a huge step, right? Like once you talk about it, once I was able to say that, it kind of changed some things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, Gosh, I still don't have any answers. Just
Yeah,
like
well,
I have more questions maybe than answers, but I think at the end of the day, you just got to follow the, or follow the fire, they say,
yeah.
right? And wherever that fire is burning and you go in that direction, it just feels better and better, you know?
And I mean, it's just if a lot of these creative writers, like people that talk about creativity, there's the Rick Rubin book and that, but they all say like once you start calling yourself that, it kind of can trick your brain, right? And it makes your
Mm,
brain, start thinking that way. And there's a lot of science, I guess, and theory behind tricking your brain into thinking however you want and finding success. And if I just really believe that I'm going to win the lottery, I will, right? It hasn't worked for me yet, but I think if I, I think you can make that work in other ways. Um, I wanted to talk about competition because, you went on to become one of the best, one of the most elite climbers around. Part of that was through competition, and I wanted your thoughts on that now, as no longer, a young climber and competing, but important step in your journey. But do you ever wonder if, I mean, I definitely think sometimes competition might do a disservice to the other parts of climbing, like the stuff I consider the best part, the connection to nature, the connection to self, the process and the tempo that allows you for error and learning and growth and blah, all the kind of hippie stuff. Um, did obviously you must have enjoyed competition at the time, but do you ever think about like, yeah, I'm glad I'm not doing that kind of climbing anymore, or I'm happy to have evolved into this other sort of climbing, or like should climbing be in the Olympics?
yeah. No, all good questions. To be honest, I don't miss competition climbing at all. I pretty much never looked back after I was about 23. So I competed from 17 to 23, on and off. It was never the driving force. I think initially it just made sense because I was gym climbing. I was doing some competitions, and then eventually I qualified for the Canadian national team. And then when that happened, I had the opportunity to go to Imst, Austria, to represent Canada. I think I was still 17, just under 18, and I took that opportunity. So that was an amazing experience. I didn't write about it in the book, but to go to like a world as a teenager,
Yeah, yeah, to
it was
travel
pretty.
anywhere.
Oh, it's pretty eye-opening. Like, it was pretty cool. Like you get to see this really cool part of the world you never thought it was never on your radar before.
Yeah.
And then I still have close friends from that trip. Like people that they live in different parts of Canada, but we still like stay in touch, and we remember those early development years. It's pretty impactful. So I would never want to remove that from my life. And if my children ever want to get into any kind of competitive thing, like I don't want to encourage them to do that. But if they want to do it on their own, we'll talk about it, and I'll try to be as supportive as I can.
Yeah.
Same way I think my parents were as supportive as they could be. and I will try to do the same. But I do not want to personally encourage them to do competition or competitive level stuff. I want them to have a wide breadth of experiences in different things. My son's in jujitsu and parkour, and we mountain bike, we climb, we swim, we just do a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff. And although just interestingly enough that you bring this up, because like just last week he heard about a jujitsu competition in Calgary, and he's like, I want to go. And he's
Yeah.
11 years old, and I was like, I didn't think he had that in him, like to want to do that. And all of a sudden, he's like, his
Yeah.
buddy
Yeah.
and his buddy and him are going for their first time. It's his first like competitive anything, and so it's emerging a little bit. Should it be in the
It's
Olympics? I personally think it's a really fun. I think it's a great sport. I think it's, in terms of a sport in the Olympics, I think it's a wonderful sport. And a lot of the diehards, like the people that I grew up with, or a lot of them, they either quit climbing after competition or they become, lifers.
Yeah.
And they actually go travel, plan their trips, it becomes this long lifetime journey, or they just quit and move on to something else. And so I think it's different for everybody. Of course it is, but
Yeah.
I think it does lay a foundation for some people, and I'm grateful for it. But my heart was always in being outside,
Yeah.
and I honestly didn't love the feeling that I got of nervousness or whatever it was, or maybe it was a bit of judgment too. If you look stupid or you foot slips or you fail,
Yeah.
I didn't love that experience, and I also, yeah, I just didn't love being like ranked. It was never my favorite part.
Fair enough. I mean, I relate. Of
Yeah,
course, that's also for a lot of people one of the best things about kids doing competitions is it teaches them that you're not going to win every game, right? And you're not going to win
right.
every tournament. And failure is part of life, and that's how you learn and learning how to pivot. And it builds
Yeah,
resilience. Like I
yeah,
understand competition. I
yeah.
think for me, I'm like your kids, right? I grew up in the mountains, so that there was so many other options to climb or ski or bike or whatever that but for someone from suburban Ontario where there's no mountains, right? And you just want to
Mhm.
climb, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, yeah. It was my first, I guess my first outlet, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it was fun. It just wasn't as much fun
Yeah.
as getting into the mountains. Yeah.
You talk about, escaping Ontario in the book and working to save your money, but ever since you were pretty young, you've been essentially a dirt bag, then maybe less dirt bag climber, but a climber the whole time. What's the shittiest job you've ever had? Like how once you got into the van for those first few years and got away from, the regular lifestyle, did you still have to tree plant in the summer and all these kind of things that you hear a lot of people that chase these kind of lifestyles have to do?
Oh, totally. I spent every dollar I ever made until I was about 30 years old. Like, I didn't save a penny. It
Yeah.
was work for 3 months, travel for two, work for two, travel for three, on and off, for quite a long time. I mean, from 18 to 30, it was like 12 years of just reinvesting in my passion for climbing, or my
Yeah.
addiction for climbing.
And what
So,
kind of jobs were you doing then? Was it all the
well,
same thing or
yeah.
was it a bunch?
No, it was a lot of different things. I mean, when I was really young and I didn't have any skills, I was like working shipping and receiving, just like packing, pick and pack, these like boxes of furniture. And it was like candles and all sorts of stuff. And they were like temp jobs.
Yeah.
And man, they just drove me to insanity. Like I literally remember kind of losing my mind in that environment. So I got out of that. I wanted to work with my hands. I got into, trim carpentry, like, I saw all the trades from, the framing to electricians, plumbers, and then me and my friends would do the trim. And my buddy Chris got me that job. We worked all over from Barrie to North York, basically the whole region, and that gave me enough money to kind of skip winters. Eventually I was just skipping winters, going for 3, 4, or 5 months, sometimes at a time, maybe more, depends on my budget, and then come home, start working again, and do it all over again. I'd say the real shift was when I moved to Squamish. I started working at the Climb On, gear shop,
Yeah.
and I worked for George, the Czech guy, and we became really good friends, and it was just this kind of quirky, like local store, but it's grown into such an amazing, you know, staple in
Yeah,
the Sea to
yeah,
Sky
no, it's
corridor,
it's huge.
and yeah, it's great. They've done such a wonderful job, and people have supported it for years. And I just, I was 22, I think, when I started working there, 22, 23, 24. I worked there years, but the reason that I liked that job was because I could rest. So
Yeah,
when I was doing, framing or carpentry, I was tired.
right.
And so I was like, well, I'd rather make a little bit less money, but on my rest days, feel like I could go charge.
Yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
I
It
did
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
Plus, you're
Paul
meeting
Bride.
people and talking about climbing, and like you're surrounded
Yeah.
by gear, and you get a deal on gear.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Community would come in. We just talk about trips and stuff. But maybe the kind of the worst job I had, maybe I don't even know if you call it that, was the I was like dish guy at the White Spot in Squamish in 2001. That's when Paul Bride and I met for the first time. And he came over to like help push my car. My truck had burnt down, had died, and we had to push it across town, like literally from White Spot. We pushed it to a garage, and he came over, and I came out in my like, full apron covered in dish sauce and, dirty dishwater and everything. And he loves to tell this story because apparently I had my White Spot visor sideways and upside down on my head. And he's like, "You are such a punk." And I graduated to fries and hamburgers and sandwiches and stuff like that. So that was a couple summers of working there too. And it was just the easiest job I could find, basically.
Yeah,
Just to get
yeah.
just to get through. Yeah, just to get by.
When you look back at that sort of van life, vagabond lifestyle, does it seem rosier now that it's so far in the rearview mirror, or were there times where you were in the van and there's a leak in the roof and it's freezing and you're like, what am I doing?
There were moments when I was actually more. I lived in this pickup truck that I had, and I was living in the back of that, and that was a little bit colder and damper than the van life.
Yeah,
That's when I switched. But and then there was a couple times where again, pretty young, like, late teens and early 20s, where my climbing ruled all my decision making.
right.
And if I wanted to go to Colorado for 3 months, that's just what I was going to do. And I did, had tough times with relationships because of that, because of those choices. It
Yeah,
it was it was kind of emotional and hard. And then I'd get there and there'd be like a week of rain, and then I'd kind of, that I'd get tired and rainy, and it kind of make you wonder what you're doing with your life when your other friends are out there going to college or university. And so there was moments of like loneliness, I'd say, where I was like trying to meet new people.
yeah.
But then when I looked at like the alternative, I was like, this beats the alternative
Sure,
every
can
time.
putting candles into a box.
Totally. Yeah. It just beat
Um,
it every single time. And so it was easy to push through, like,
yeah.
but yeah, there's moments of
With the
loneliness.
with the
Yeah.
relationships, was it the fact that you were always coming and going that was the problem, or was it that like you're trying to drag a girlfriend back to a pickup truck with a piss chug and like
Yeah.
and not a lot of future prospect looking?
No, the no, the very luckily the girls that I ended up dating were actually into the whole
Right.
van life thing. It
Yeah.
was the commitment. They were like, a lot of them wanted to go for like 2 weeks or a month and then go back and get a real job.
Right.
And I wanted to live on the road full time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I just had a much higher level of commitment. And, I had these blinders on where I was like, I'm just going to do this for 10 years because this is what brings me the most amount of joy, was being in the mountains and just being exhausted every day. I just loved it. I just loved it. I loved going to bed with ragged hands and, achy muscles and
Yeah.
just falling asleep to the sound of creeks and rivers and, and birds. I just loved it. I don't know why. And the girls that I dated, it's not that we weren't a good team or anything like that. It's just that my level of obsession was
Higher.
higher, and it often created
Oh man,
some conflict.
even just you talking
Yeah.
about the ragged hands, like obviously I never climbed anywhere near a level that you did, but I grew up climbing and I remember, being a busboy after a day of climbing, we drive down to Squamish, climb, drive up to Whistler to be a busboy and just trying to wring out the dishcloth and your arms are
Right.
pumped and you're like, oh, what a great day, right? Let's bring it back to Squamish then, because eventually this will turn back into a romantic story. But Squamish when you arrived, pretty rough, and I was really excited to see you had the "Don't meth around" sign mentioned in the book. But talk about the Squamish when you first got here compared to the Squamish that you were just here last week. So the Squamish of now.
It's night and day, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
came what year 2000 or
Yeah, no, actually, when I look back, it was April of 2001.
right?
So, things were just starting to thaw out a little bit. The sun started, coming out more in April.
Yeah,
I do think the weather has changed a little bit since then. There was a lot more, felt like there was a lot more rain days.
totally.
Um, and it feels like now there's less of them, which is, to be honest, it's probably great for climbers,
Yeah,
loving it. Summers are dramatically much hotter, but in terms of like, yeah, watching the sort of economic machine of tourism pick up over the last 25 years and turn that town into, what was an industrial town, um, into what it is now. It's
yeah.
it's quite it's quite a I think everyone sees it and feels it and has something to say about it, or it's undeniable, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of towns like this over around North America that have seen these transformations, but it's very prevalent in Squamish.
I wanted to ask because you eventually relocated to Canmore. Um, do you see any of the things that you've watched happen in Squamish sort of starting to gain traction there, or are they remote enough from the big city that it's slower or not existent?
So yeah, Canmore's a little different because Canmore actually had its first big boom when the Olympics happened.
Right,
And
88.
so, yeah, exactly. So, throughout the 90s and then early 2000, Canmore was actually already booming. And you could see these like high-end condominiums being built, high-end luxury homes were being built. So when I first came here, I was like, I'll never it's like Jackson Hole. Like I was like, I'll never be able to live here ever.
Right.
But I can room up with six buddies and live in the laundry room and still have the summer of my life and then leave.
Yeah.
Um, and Squamish at that time was, very, I mean, for lack of a better term, it was like kind of depressed,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you couldn't sell your house if you wanted to in 2001. Like it just sat,
Yeah. I mean,
and
that's a really good real estate tip is like if you drive into a town and there's a sign that says "Don't meth around" over the highway,
yeah,
and
so
it's
you
got
remember it.
and it's got mountains and oceans and start buying. Buy when the meth freaks are running wild and then just sit
Oh
on it.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, because I grew up in Whistler, so
Yeah, but I think it would have been scary for a lot of people. I remember like from the white spot looking at the smoke bluffs.
yeah.
And I remember calling my mom and dad on a payphone and being like, "You've got to come see this place. It is unbelievable," right? But when people would come see it, all they would see was the dark side.
Yeah.
They would see the tarps on people's houses, and they would see that there was a bit of a drug issue and
And
some
smell
alcoholism, and
smell the pulp mill.
yeah. And I just think all these weird things, almost like the perfect storm, had basically transformed that city. And Lydia and I, my wife, we still go back every year. We've lived
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
We lived there actually just last year. Actually, we did 2.5 years during COVID and moved back to Canmore last year. So we go back and forth. I think we're almost at a place in our relationship where we've done 50-50.
Right.
And when I met her, she was living here. She's
Yeah.
very drawn to the Rocky Mountains. And so, as our relationships evolved, the Rocky Mountains has really grown on me too. And, now it's actually hard to stay put in one place without dreaming of the other. When we're in Squamish, we dream of the Rockies. And when we're in the
Right.
Rockies, we dream of Squamish. And I don't know if that'll ever end. I think I'll be 85 years old
The
if I
the
live that long.
classic the
And
classic grass is always greener, eh?
well, they're both green. They're both very
Yeah.
green. I heard a really good one the other day. Grass is greenest where you water it.
There we
And,
go, right?
wherever you choose to, put your attention and focus on, anyway, it's just, I've come to terms with the fact that, they're both they're both beautiful places, and we're gonna fight like hell to make it work for us because the mountains mean a lot to us.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's you mentioned, you met Lydia here in Squamish. It's a nice part of the book because, rock climbing is such a focused kind of thing, but you're able to turn some of the chapters of your book are basically a romance story, right? To give us a break from the hardcoreness of some of the other chapters. But yeah, you just I don't want to give away the whole book, but obviously, for you, it was a pretty quick click when Lydia walked into the store, into your life, or walked past the store.
Yeah, it was yeah, I mean we talk about it, we reflect on it, and it was, even though neither of us wanted to indicate how we were feeling about each other, it felt pretty real. And it was complicated. Life's complicated in your 20s sometimes. It took a while for us to feel like we could vocalize or express how we're
Yeah.
feeling. But once that happened, we pretty much moved in together pretty much right away and never looked back. So yeah, it's I mean, it's a pivotal moment in my life, that's for sure. Just like finding climbing was like, finding climbing was like, it was like that day in the gym was very similar to meeting Lydia. And who knows what the future holds with our journeys, but I'm so grateful for the way things have unfolded. And yeah, we're going to, so we met in 2005. So we're coming up, actually, we were talking
Nice.
about it. We're coming
20
up
years.
on 20 years. I think it was the end of May. She did a road trip to Squamish, end
Nice.
of May or early June. It might've been May 24 weekend. And, yeah, we would have met 20 years ago this month.
Amazing. Is it when you're putting this book together, are you bouncing chapters off of her, or did you kind of hold it off until it was in a place where you felt I'm ready to show it to her, or what was the process like with that? Did she play a role?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't actually, until, like you said, till I was sort of ready to let her
Yeah.
have a read, and that was actually last summer, right before, yeah, it was summer, and she read the whole thing in, whatever it was, a day, I think, maybe a day and a half with the kids and stuff, and she was so good at catching things that I didn't catch. She was so good about bringing things like she didn't mess around. She brought like a bunch of items to almost every chapter. And I was
Yeah.
like, I changed every one of them. They were all awesome. And she knows a lot of these stories. Of course, she knows me and she knows everything. And so, she was really good. And it actually gave me more confidence in the book itself
Right.
because, she would help me with certain words that just felt better.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you try to say something, it just doesn't come out right. And that gave me insecurity. I was like, here's what I'm trying to say. And she really helped shape that. She was huge. She was actually the most critical part was having her read it and then getting her feedback.
Yeah. And she knows
Yeah,
you well enough, and she's secure enough that she's not going to sugarcoat it to protect your ego or
right.
anything, right? So
Right. And she loves to read. She loves to read and she's actually a terrific writer in her own, she's very poetic in her writing. And I always consider myself very sort of trip report type of writing,
yeah. Well,
and yeah, she's very creative and artistic.
I wanted to talk about that because you have been writing articles and trip reports and stuff for quite a while. Um, Did you ever have any training in that, or did you just drift to writing as sort of a way because you mentioned you're shy with the other media, and this way you could still get the story out and control the narrative, as they say?
Yeah, I basically started writing because at the time the magazines would just ask me to. They're
Right.
like, "Hey," because print media was everything, in the year 2000, and
Yeah.
so there was no YouTube or any other really. It was photography and writing basically, and a lot of us grew up on mountain literature, books, and things like that, and so
Yeah.
whenever I did something that a magazine or an editor or climber thought was notable, they would ask me to write something, and so I would do that. And you know, I think I got okay at generally being able to tell a story from beginning to end. I
Yeah.
think over the years I sort of, and also just reading climbing literature helped too. Yeah, but I've never considered myself like I don't I don't write just for the sake of writing. Um, like a lot of people do. I read like Stephen King's book about how he has to write 3 hours a day no matter what.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Great,
just part of his
great book on
routine.
writing. That's a helpful
Yeah.
book, I found.
Yeah, I read that many years ago,
Yeah.
and I actually wish I could have reread it again before I started this process. But it was a really good book, and I've never really had that. I just want to go rock climbing. So
Yeah.
for me to, put all of that into a package like this, it's pretty daunting, I'd say. It would, and I'm a little shy about it, but I'm also happy that I did it, and
Yeah.
I got a really good.
How long did it take? Was it a year of pounding it away or?
In 2019, my wife and I did this long tour and living in a trailer, basically, a van trailer combo. And, I started talking with Patagonia about doing it. So actually it took about 5 years to have this product. But COVID really was a monkey wrench because when our kids were home all the time, I couldn't concentrate in any way. Only when they started going to school did I actually start writing more. So
Is
there was months and months and months where I didn't do anything.
So yeah, I wanted to say, I mean, you talk about climbing literature and growing up with that. I think, you've pulled off maybe more than you expected with this book because there is that narrative that weaves through it, and it does have, you know, it's more than just the facts, right? I grew up, here in the Sea to Sky, climbing lightly in Squamish here and Whistler, and reading like the John Long books about Yosemite, rock jocks, wall rats, and hang dogs, I feel like your book is gonna do for young kids what those books kind of did for me, which was really show you a really high performing side of this sport, but also inspire you to get out and just do it at whatever level you can. So I think the book's like a great accomplishment. Congratulations.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much. I do really appreciate the kind words because, I do have a little bit of insecurity around it, and that really helps. And I think, my wife also kind of said, I think the insecurity that I had or have is that I never really had like this epic tale to tell, this enduring period of my life of struggle. And she's like, sometimes people just want a light read. They just want a happy story sometimes. Like not everything needs to be
Yeah.
dramatic. And so yeah, I guess like some of the insecurity comes from that. But when I hear things like what you've just said and what my wife reminds me is it's really positive. And I also I really love positive stories as well. And so I'm hoping it resonates with a group of people like that. I remember reading Lynn Hill's book when I was like 20 years old, and I just remember I was at the Craig reading it because I couldn't get enough of wanting to learn more about how these people and how this world operated. So I hope it has an effect on people in whatever phase of life they're in. But I do often get emails or messages from like college kids who aren't sure about their path forward.
Yeah.
And, to some degree, I hope they get something from this that like nobody really ever has it figured out. To be honest, I remember talking to Yvon Chouinard when I first met him down in Ventura many years ago. He's like, "So where are you going next?" I was like, "I have no idea," and he's like, "Neither do I." And he's like, he was like, I don't know, he's probably close to 80 at the time or something, or 70, mid 70s, and it was just reassuring that like nobody really knows exactly the next chapter of their life. So I do hope people enjoy it. And yeah, I'm really honored to work with Patagonia on this for sure. Like they were one of the most I mean, they're the most responsible brand I knew come growing up.
Yeah.
And they were making such kick-ass products that I wanted to work with them in any capacity. And I'm just so grateful that our relationships evolved this far. And it really just came organically out of, hey, we have a publishing branch, and you have writing experience, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was a collaboration that just sort of, evolved and turned into this. So,
Well,
yeah.
they're also very responsible with the book because they made the font size so small to save on paper, right? They're using less paper because they have a 6 or 7 point font size. we we get that all the time. Has anyone complained to you about how small the text is in the book?
No, not yet, but I
Right,
don't know how many people have it yet.
right,
It's
because
not,
it just came out.
it just came out. I think some of the shops and stores are just getting
Well,
their
let's see.
copy this week.
I'm
Um,
interested to see about that because obviously,
yeah,
I'm
did it hurt your eyes? Or?
no, it's fine. I'm a bit older than you, but I had, they told me I needed to get glasses, hearing aids, and the CPAP sleep apnea machine all in the same year. They told me you're done. You're old. So my glasses work fine and the book reads amazing. But we do with the magazine, we get letters all the time about how our font is too small.
Right,
And that's what
right.
I
Yeah.
always say. Well, we're trying to use less paper, the trees. But Patagonia one upped us, man. Their font's even smaller than ours. So good for them.
It is, and I would say that I did notice it. I had to read it recently. This is actually the first time I've ever read it from front to back. I read
Right.
it for an audio version that will be available at
Oh,
some point.
nice. That's good that you did your own audio version.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I didn't really want to do it because I actually I'm terrified of the sound of my own voice, but my wife encouraged me to, and yeah, they apparently it came out
Yeah.
pretty okay.
It's
So
it's always better when the author does it than hiring some, professional voice actor.
yeah, I guess so. I just feel like my voice is so dry and monotone, but I don't know. Apparently the feedback was good. So
No, no, no,
looking forward
yeah.
to that coming out. And I did notice as I was reading it how small the print was.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was like, but it works, and it creates a
It,
nice thin book. And it is I think Honnold, my friend Alex, read it in one day.
right.
Um
Of course he
so
did.
and then yeah, he's a powerful reader. He plows through them.
Everything.
But the other thing is, you can actually read it one chapter at a time, or you could
Totally.
pick up one chapter, like it halfway through the book and just read that, and then
Yeah.
so I kind of wanted it to be more like that,
I
but
think
you can also read it in a push. Yeah.
I think that one chapter at a time thing will be one of the book's big advantages. Like you said, some kid will be at the rock, at the crag, camping in a tent, wake up, read a chapter, and then go out and get after it, right?
Yeah.
And not feel like, oh, I have to read the next chapter because there was a cliffhanger, and that like
Right.
it's not sucking you in to keep reading. It's giving you these perfect, like you said, positive stories that are going to hopefully get people psyched. So I think you'll see that sort of thing happen in this book, kicking around dirtbag, climbing camps at the bottom of cliffs.
Oh, that would be nice. I'd like that. Yeah.
Writing is obviously a creative endeavor. I feel like you kind of say your writing maybe has been gotten more creative as the more you've done it compared to some of your earlier stuff. But do you look at climbing in a similar way as a creative act?
I did for sure, especially like new routes, developing,
Right. Yeah.
discovering, I mean, it all starts with, looking up at that clean line, that steep face, and then just wondering. Like I've always been a very curious person. And when I started climbing, that curiosity just got like, it was like on steroids. It was like, I wonder, oh, can I do that? I wonder if I could do that. Has that ever been explored? Has anyone ever climbed over there? I just had endless questions about places and features, and it's very creative. Like, you can take, when you look at a climb, you can take it, oftentimes the rock lends itself to going, left or right or straight up, or, and one could be a totally different experience than the other. And so I loved that creative experience. I love discovering that there was this sneaky foothold around the corner that I couldn't see before. Like I just loved
Yeah.
that.
Does
And it became almost an addiction in itself, was route development. Yeah.
does that ability to find the hidden thing, or does that sort of diminish as I mean, you've climbed some of the hardest climbs in the world. Are is a climb like Cobra Crack or these other climbs that you talk about in the book, is that a thing where it's such a sequence that it has to be a certain way and that and there's chalk on the holds to let you know where to go? Or even on those climbs, is there still that one sneaky little thing that you can find that maybe somebody else missed?
Oh yeah, totally. Like on Cobra Crack, I think maybe only one other person repeated it the same way that I originally climbed it.
Right.
The community has found alternative beta and ways to solve the problem. And in many ways, it actually makes for a slightly better route because it flows a little bit better and it's a little bit less painful to do, left hand in the pocket versus the right hand sometimes, just because of the bone structure of your knuckles, right? And
Right.
so, yeah, just because, I've been the first to do a route doesn't mean that that's the permanent beta. I mean, most of the time we do find out where the best sequence is, but over time, yeah, it changes a little bit. And then maybe the second part of your question was, as we age, like I know people who are in their 70s and early 80s who still route develop. They still love going out looking for that virgin line that's never been touched, cleaning it up and turning it into something. Yeah, there's an album out there called From Dirt Grows the Flowers, and they just turn this like nothingness into something that's incredible, and the whole community gets to experience. And so I don't think that will ever go away for me.
Yeah, awesome. So as we wind it down here, there was a couple things in the book that I wanted to touch on. Just let's take it out on some life lessons for the kids out there. But one thing you say is that the fear of regret drives a lot of your decisions.
Mm,
And it reminds me, I just spoke with photographer Jody McDonald, and she said a similar thing. Like she said, I know how I feel if I don't do it, and I don't like that feeling, but I don't know how I feel if I do it. And then she would end up dropping into another 6 years at sea or whatever. But yeah, talk about,
mm.
the fear of regret. Does it still drive your decisions now like it did when you were younger?
Yeah, I relate entirely to that sentiment. Like basically, if I didn't do something, that fear would start to compound and grow inside me until the fear of doing it exceeded the fear of not doing it. And that meant being a pretty young kid, going out on my own into countries and places that I didn't know anybody, and was just throwing myself out there. And it can be intimidating, but I find that I've never really regretted those choices. And so for the most part, there's a saying, you win some, you learn some. And I found that when you can kind of work through the fear of something, you either win or you learn, and one way or the other, you're moving forward for the most part. And so that's been very true to me, and I've tried to continue that philosophy since a pretty young age.
Are there still, objectives that you've always had your eye on, but you haven't quite gotten around to, or maybe you starting to feel like now with the family, I'm aging out, or is that's different than the kind of regret we're just talking about there, right?
I mean, yes and no. There's definitely objectives I really, really am drawn to. Realistically, am I going to have enough time to do everything that's on my dream list? I'm coming to terms with the fact that there are climbs I'm going to have to let go, and that's okay. I can appreciate them from a different place in my life. There's still these beautiful, remarkable, features and mountains and walls, but I've come to realize that I'll never climb everything I want to, because my desire to climb will never fade, or I don't think it'll fade. And so I just have to prioritize some that are more important than others, and try to really hone in and just stay focused, I guess, at the end of the day, is stay focused on the things I really want to do, the ones that are
Right.
higher priority.
The prime objectives.
Yeah. And that's, yeah.
One of the other things near the end of the book, you say it's not the pursuit of happiness that counts, but the pursuit is happiness, which is a nice way of saying, what a lot of people I think start to realize as they've gone through some of these adventures in life. But that's the life. Like what you do with your days is how you live your life, right? Not some end goal every time. Um, What do you say to the young kids out there that are, that are going to read your book and that might be thinking about taking this a similar lifestyle, this kind of tightrope between adventure and stability and the knowing and the unknowing? Kids that are saving up their money to go on that big trip. What do you say to people that are probably inspired by this book but might need just another push out the door?
Oh gosh, general advice is a very tough one, but I mostly say go for it. I try to have a pretty positive outlook on things, and when things change, I try to celebrate change. I try to celebrate, you know, pivotal moments in your life, whether it's good or bad. I try to have a positive spin on it. Like for example, if there's a relationship that didn't work out, well, that can also be an amazing opportunity to go on a solo trip, or or a job that didn't work out, or a promotion can also be an adventure. Like I try to look at the silver lining on everything. And when I'm talking to young people, I mean, I generally say go for it. But you have to really reflect on what you value in life, whether you value time, you value luxury items, you value travel. There's a lot of things in the world to value, family, relationships, friendships, careers. And so I think you really have to reflect on what's important to you as an individual. And I believe that there's a time and place for most things. A year can go by pretty fast these days, but a lot can happen. A lot can change in a year. So, there's different seasons for different times. And I generally say take more risk when you're younger. That doesn't necessarily mean physical risk, but just take more. I would just basically say, go on more adventures if you can, even if they're mini adventures, like even a weekend adventure can be like a lifetime memory. It doesn't have to be this, epic 2-year long saga to accomplish something. It could just be small adventures that build up to one bigger one. So generally I would say go for it, surround yourself by positive people, optimistic people, fun people, and try to balance it all. It's not easy. I think we all try to struggle with our hunger for that wide open freedom and the constraints of everyday life. And so if you can laugh at that and push through, then I think that's a huge win.
Awesome. Well, you don't know if you don't go, that's for sure. The book is called Uplifted. Sonnie Trotter, thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. A real pleasure. Thanks, Pete. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Sonnie. The book is out now. It's called Uplifted, and it's a worthy read, even if you've never tied a figure-8 knot in your life. Find it at your local bookstore today. Summer is rolling up quickly, which means there will be new print editions of Mountain Life hitting the streets in select Canadian mountain towns soon. And if you don't live in one of those towns, you can subscribe or catch all the stories online at mountainlifemedia.ca. Thank you again to our partners at Citizen Watches, who build sturdy, excellent watches for adventures on land, sea, or air. Check out the ProMaster series. And thanks to Shirai Rules and Adrian Gendro for their talents in voice work and guitar off the top. And mostly, thank you for listening. This is pod number 59 of Live It Up with Mountain Life, and I know some of you have been riding along with us since day one. We're all truly grateful for that, and I feel like we're only getting better from here. So take care out there, mountain lifers. Have fun, make good decisions, and obey the fire bans when they kick in any day now. Until then, keep your knots tight and your morals loose, and please, please, leave the campsite better than you found it.